help me with my statistics on Twitch, you might as well visit the Twitch channel as well as following along on the in the Meet. I will be sharing screen on both of them. We can do a little bit of chat and so on Twitch as well. Session 2, my good fellows, and hello Pedro. Um, did you have the chance to review that Pedro video I sent you?
I watched part of it. I watched part of it.
It was
Really
so
interesting.
it was so funny because two I know two Portuguese guys and they are both named Pedro. No, I'm kidding. I know
Okay.
more than two people from Portugal. Good to have you with us today as well. Good to have everyone. Let's get started. And the others, if you're late, you're late. You can always catch the recording later. I will be sharing that. I did share the recording from the last session and also the PDF of the slides, and I will do the same thing with these slides. I'm actually going to send them right now because there might be a little bit of code that could be useful for you later on in the presentation. So let me just see that, and I'm going to share that on Slack, my good people. Let's see where's Slack. There it is, and I'm going to share that in the Work the Web 2021 channel. If I just can do that, there we go. Right. So, without much further ado, we should get started. I have a little bit of slides today as well as last time. We can't really do without theory sessions. We need them as well. And then we're going to do a little coding and put some more practice behind the words. So this is Web Technologies 101 Part 2. Let's see. There we go. Right. Hello, Anya. Nice to have you with us.
Hi, everyone.
We went over web application development, front-end versus back-end, some web protocols, and some cool acronyms, of course. And it's not only about showing off. These protocols and the knowledge about addressing methods and so on are really important if we want to move ahead and learn how to build applications, especially modern type of web applications that are often being very distributed, meaning that you have a backend system and then a client of some sorts that consume data from that API. So today we're going to cover a little more theory about the request response cycle, which is also a very fundamental thing. We're going to talk about HTTP and verbs different HTTP verbs and what they are used for, and we're going to talk about query parameters and strings, and we're going to code a little bit in Express, and I have a bonus for you guys at the end, and that will be touching upon some testing. We're going to take some baby steps in writing automated tests of our small Hello World application. Everything starts with Hello World, as we usually say. So, don't I have a quote? No quote today. Well, that's weird. I usually have a quote in my presentations. All right, let's talk about the request response cycle. Really important. So, a bit of theory on that. So request response is a pattern that is used when we deal with web-based applications, and it's very simple. It's a form of a client-server architecture. A requester sends a request message to another system. You guys want to, Bagol, I think you're going to have to mute yourself a little bit, or perhaps I can do that for you. There we go. So you send off a request message. Hold on a second. There we go. There we go. Right, you send off a request message to a replier system. That system receives the message, processes it somehow, and ultimately it returns a message in response. So, request, response. And there are a few things that with that pattern that are really important. For instance, and we're going to cover this again a few times over the course of this training program. But one thing that is worth mentioning is that the request that you are making needs to contain all the information that the server needs to process that request and respond to you. So in a web-based application, the server forgets about you the very millisecond it responds to your request. There is no memory on the server side that are being persistent in any way. So one request is done in total isolation, meaning that the consequent request does not take into account that there was a request done just a few seconds ago. That new request needs to contain all the data for the server to be able to process it and to respond. And that is statelessness, and that is what makes the web scale, because the servers do not have to remember a lot of users and a lot of things, keep a lot of things in memory. They only deal with one single request at a time, which also means that if a request is a bad request, it's not properly formatted or in any other way leads to the server getting confused or raising an error, it doesn't really matter, because the next one starts anew and it will not be affected by the previous failure. And this is a concept that sometimes is hard for people to internalize and to kind of understand or wrap their head around, but it's a very important piece of knowledge, that the request and the response is done in total isolation without anything being persistent. And then, of course, the more tech savvy of yours would ask, but how can you stay logged into a system, for instance? Like, how can Facebook remember you between the different requests that you are actually, authenticated with that service? Or how can Instagram know that you are who you are on every request? You don't have to pass in the password and then the username on every request, of course, right? And that is very simple, because that information is actually being stored on your local device and being passed over with every request, so that every request identifies you over and over again with the system. That is usually done with some sort of a token, but more on that in another session further down the line in this training program. When you navigate to a URL by typing something into the search, the address field in your browser, or by clicking on a link or submitting a web form or whatever, what happens then is that a request, an HTTP request, is being sent off to the server. And there's a fantastic little illustration here. You make a request and you get an HTTP response, and back and forward, back and forward. Right. So we spoke a little bit about parameters last time, because they often come into play when we work with different types of requests. And you have to understand now that for me there's a challenge in organizing the structure in the order of when I tell you different type of things, because they are interconnected and they build upon each other. So I chose to talk a little bit about parameters now, and we're going to talk about the HTTP requests more in detail in just a few minutes. But since I mentioned parameters last time we saw each other, I want to go a little deeper into that. Now, parameters are used to send additional information to the server or when you are making a request. And we saw that on the Guardian example, that there was this question mark and then a key value. So you can use that information in conjunction to an HTTP request to create objects in your database, for instance, to pass in some query into your search functionality. You can direct the server to do certain things, and they are usually part of the URL. And when they are received by your application, the parameters are being transformed into an object if we're talking JavaScript, a hash if we're talking Python or Ruby, or directory. I think it's called in Java. I'm not sure. I don't remember anymore. But it depends on a language. But they are being sent over as strings in a specific format, usually well, not usually, but always like the key name equal sign and then the value that the key should hold. But when it's being hit or received by your application, it becomes some sort of a structured format like an object, and that's what I kind of exemplify with this parameters equal and then curly brackets key colon and value. All right. We will see examples of this in a while. Now, so a little more about the HTTP request before we move on to about parameters, I guess. An HTTP request consists of several things. Among them, the two ones that are standing out are the headers and the body. Now, if we would compare a request with a letter, then the headers would be like the envelope, if that analogy works out for you, with an address to who this letter is sent to, and of course a sender's address could be handy, and some other metadata about the request itself, like authentication tokens, the type of request, what format it's supposed to be in, and so on. And we're gonna try to keep this as simple as possible. Today we're gonna dive deeper into this kind of things later on. So that would be the headers, the envelope, and then you have the body, which would be the love letter itself, if that's a love letter you're sending to somebody. I don't know. Been a while since I sent a letter. Should probably do it more often. And the body is not really a requirement. You could potentially send off an empty request, and which is something that you often do, especially when you click on links or anything like that. The only time a body is kind of needed is when you really have to send additional data, when you want to create an object or something, when you do a post request. But more on that a little later as well. So headers and body, important parts of the HTTP request. But then, how do you know if the request actually was received or properly processed? So how about getting a receipt on of the status of the request? Has it reached its destination? Was the resource I looked for actually found? Did everything work out as supposed? Did the server respond directly to me, or was I pointed to another service, and so on? For normal people, these questions are totally irrelevant, because they will see on the screen whether the link that you clicked on or the address that you looked for in the address field actually returns something. But for us programmers, these questions are really important, because we are dependent on the network actually and the servers actually working. And if they don't work, we need to handle that. So we need to take care of anything that goes wrong, so that our end users don't have to suffer from it. So the receipt that we're looking for is basically the status, and there are a status code that is being returned as a receipt of our request. And there are 5 groups of status codes, and they are usually grouped by, they are grouped by the first digit. We do not have to worry about the 100 series. They are purely informational. But there is a lot of status codes in the 200 series, which basically means that everything is okay. And the most common one is actually 200. A status code of 200 means that all good. I received your request, and I'm able to respond with the resource that you were looking for. There's nothing more to do here. The 300 series means that the client is redirected to a different resource. That's a redirect series. We will not deal with that so much, definitely not today. The 400 series means that the request itself contains some sort of an error, and the most common one among the 400s are the 404, right? Which means that the resource was not found on server. So 404 is the most important, most common one. 418 is what is that? Is that the teacup thing? I think so. There are a few in.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm a teapot.
yeah. I'm a teapot. Right. That's a joke from way back a decade ago, I think. 422 means unprocessable entity. 401 means unauthorized, and there are quite a lot of 400 errors. And then you have the 500 series, which is probably also something that you guys must have stumbled upon on your journey through the internet. 500 is often manifested with some text saying bad gateway or something like that. But there are more than one 500 error, of course. So in the 500 series, we can see that the server encountered some sort of an internal error and can't fulfill the request. That's basically what that means. All right, and I found this fantastic tweet. Was it a tweet? Yeah, it's a tweet. From a guy named Steve Losh. Don't know who it is, but he explained it very bluntly that the 100 series means hold on, 200 here you go, 300 go away, and then the 400 you effed up, and the 500 means I fucked up. Right. So that's one way of looking at it. If you want to have something to memorize this by. All right. So let's talk a little bit about query strings. So query strings or query parameters, or simply parameters, are, as we already said, name value pairs used to pass in additional information to the server. Now, there are limits on how much information you can pass in to the server in this way. The maximum amount of characters shouldn't exceed 1024. And the entire URL, including the query parameters, shouldn't be bigger than 2048 characters. So in principle, you can have a little more than 1024 on the query, but you should probably avoid that. Now, the thing with query parameters is that they are visible in the URL and they are sent over unencrypted through the network, which means that you should not be passing sensitive information using query strings with a GET request. We will touch upon this later because they can be easily intercepted and listened upon. So for security reasons, you shouldn't make authentication calls, for instance, when you log in as a GET request with query strings. You can use different other kinds of parameters for that. And we already touched upon this last time, but let's go over this again. Spaces cannot be used in query params. There are certain special characters that needs to be escaped. We did that in JavaScript at the end of last session, but so we used URI encoded. We should have used URI encoded component if we want to encode those special characters in JavaScript, but that's a different story. The question mark is, of course, a reserved keyword, and the end sign or ampersand is also a reserved character. We can't use that unless we escape it, of course. But there are more than just query parameters because there are actually some different other kinds of params that we will take a look at. So query params are the one that we already discussed a little bit, but there are route or path params. You can send off parameters in your headers, of course, and there are also post params, and we will look on those at those quickly today. If we just take a look at the query parameter again, this is an URL to the sorry, to the GitHub API, and that makes a query or searches for every user with the username Barack. So I took that because of Barack Obama, ex-president of the United States. So if we do API github.com/search/users, and then the now famous question mark, and then the key value, Q equals Barack, that will actually search for Barack Obama. And this is not, set in stone. The Q name is a name that the developers at GitHub set for that query parameter, and you can't really assume that every system will use that one single letter key name to accept a query string. But in this case, in the case of the GitHub API, that is exactly what we're doing. But that's just one type of parameters. There are others. For instance, if we stick around at the GitHub API, if we would like to take a look at Craft Academy as a user, I think this is the this is appropriate URL, so you can probably use that. Then we identify the resource by the URL, by part of the URL, and then a specific instance of that resource is identified as part of by the part of the URL. So users/Craft Academy will point us to the Craft Academy account on the GitHub API. But if we would change that Craft Academy to something else, then we will be pointed to another resource if that resource actually exists, right? So it looks to a human eye like a sub page, like there would be something like a physical file or something for Craft Academy, but there isn't. This is actually being looked up in the database, but the application takes that last part of the URL of the request and searches through the database for that particular name. And if there is a name like that in your database, then that resource is being returned, and if not, we get a 404 as a response. And then we have something called post parameters, which is they are sent off in combination of a post request. They are usually used to create something, usually an object, and the key and values should but don't have to reflect the attributes of that specific resource. So if you are creating, let's say, a news article in a news articles database, then the post request should contain keys like title, content, author, and so on, and some values associated with those keys. So that is what post params are used for, and they are sent as part of the body instead of the URL. So it's the part of the body part of the request. So enough about that. Let's try this out a little bit, folks. So I sent the PDF in the Work the Web Slack channel. So I hope you guys can access this, because there's a little bit of code here, and we will be making use of Express. So hopefully you guys have your Node installations in order. If not, we're gonna work our way through that one way or another, and we're gonna create a folder. That's the first thing I do, mkdir express demo. Then I'm going to cd into that folder, of course. I'm going to initiate a yarn application by this yarn init -y command. Then I'm going to create a new file that will be, I will give it a name of app.js, and then I will add two packages using yarn. I will say I will add Express as a package and then NodeMon as a development package. And then we're going to open this up in code. So I don't know, everybody has their cameras off, so keep them off. I don't see if you're nodding or not, but let's do this, folks. That's the first thing. Then we will write a little bit of code, but I will start that. We'll get back to that slide in just a second. So let's open up our terminal, and I will get my terminal up on the screen. Hopefully you can see everything. If it's too small for you, I can make this a little bigger. So I already get a question. What does the -d do? And I will answer that in just a few seconds, Ethan, if that's okay. So mkdir Express demo. We could call it Hello World Express or whatever. So I usually prefer yarn over npm. Why? No idea, to be honest. It gives me fewer error messages. It's like sticking your head in the sand, because sometimes npm is very verbose in terms of, oh, there's something wrong with this package, and yarn is more fault tolerant. So the error still exists, or the warning still exists, but I just don't have to look at it. And Mike makes a very good argument. It's Microsoft. npm is apparently Microsoft. Is it really? I didn't know that. Anyway. Right, so I'm going to cd into the Express.js demo, and I'm going to say yarn init and -y, and the -y just says that I'm going to say yes to every question that pops up, because otherwise they ask me a lot of stuff. And then I want to say yarn add Express and yarn add -d NodeMon. Oops, spelling mistake. There we go. And we wanted to create a file, so we're going to say touch app.js. The PDF is in the Work the Web 2021 Slack channel, Ethan. And I'm going to open this one up in my code editor. And now I'm going to answer Ethan's question about what the D was all about. If we now open up the package JSON, we can see that there is some content in that file. And there are so this is a JSON file, which is an object. We're going to talk more about JSON as an object notation at some point, and we will use it extensively for many reasons. But you can see here that in this object you have a few key values. You have the name, Express Demo, there's a version number, and there's a main called index.js. We will actually change that from index.js to app.js, so don't forget that. We need to change the main from index to app.js. Then there is a license information that this is a Massachusetts Institute of Technology open source license. That's a default setting, doesn't really matter. But here on line 6 you have a key that is called dependencies, that it itself contains another object. And here we are saying that we will be using Express as a library when we run the application. And then on line 9 you have dev dependencies, and in that setting in that key we are saying that we're going to use NodeMon. So what is the difference between, so the D means that that we are storing nodemon as a dev dependency, development dependency, which basically means, Ethan, on everybody else, that nodemon is only going to be used in our development process, not when we deploy this application to a server. We're not going to deploy it, but if we would have deployed it, the nodemon package will never be used in production. Does that answer your question, Ethan? Only partially, actually, because now the follow-up question would be, so what the F is nodemon? And nodemon is a runner we will use nodemon to run this application, to actually fire up a server on our local host. There was another question here that I think I missed. Let's see, from Pedro, was it? Yes, the arrow up means that in nodemon's case 2.0.10 is the lowest version we can accept. So this 2.0.10 or higher. Okay, so so that's it in terms of configuration for now. Let's have a look at the next slide, because we want to add a little bit of code and I want to talk you through this one. So in our app.js, we're going to create a few constants or variables. Well, they're called variables, but they're constants because they will not be changed anyway later on. So first we're going to add express and store it in a constant called express. Then we will instantiate a new application by invoking the express function. We're going to store the number 3000 in another variable called port, and then we will jump to the very bottom, actually, to the place where we say app.listen. So that will actually start the server, and we will listen on the port, which is port 3000 in this case. And then we were just gonna output something in our terminal saying that the server is running on HTTP localhost 3000. Let's take a look at the part that says app.get. So you see, this app.get function will tell Express that we will be listening for a GET request as a default path. Basically, that's what it means. App.get, and then as a string, just a /. And when we receive such a request, we will invoke a function, which is what comes after the comma in this case. This function will take two arguments, and by convention, they are called res. Rec stands for request, and res for response, right? Remember the request-response cycle, right? So then we have a callback, a block of code that will be executed once this function is being invoked. And on the next line of code, I'm saying console table, and then as an argument, I'm saying rec.query. So anything that is in this query parameter will be outputted in a nice little table in our terminal. And then I'm creating a variable called greeting that I'm saying that it would be the request query message. And if that is empty, if there is no such thing, we will just use a string that says world, and then I will send off to whoever invoked this function. I will send off a little bit of HTML saying h1 hello, and then the greeting that was passed in an exclamation mark. So I'd say let's code this up and see if it works. Okay. So I will go over to my VS Code. I will go to my app.js, and I will just say const express require express and then we want to say const app equals express. Oh, I misspelled express, of course. There we go. Express, and then parentheses, and then I'm just going to say const port equals 3000, and I will say app listen on port, and then a callback, and the callback would say, the callback was supposed to say what? Server is running, right? Okay, so console 1, and then here, you see, I don't know if you can see that, but this is important. Oh, sorry. This is not, these are not quotation marks that I'm using here. I'm using backticks. Do you know what backticks are?
String templates.
Yes,
Right?
string literals, right. So they are on a Mac, at least they are placed just before the erase button up in the right corner. There should be somewhere on every keyboard, one way or another. You need to find them. If you don't find them, you could in principle use single quotes, but then you have to change the syntax a little bit. But I'm just going to say server is listening on HTTP, and this is purely informational, so we don't need this at all. Localhost colon, and then I can do a string interpolation and then port like this. Okay. Right, so this is what I would do now at this point. And so the next thing is, of course, to get to configure this route or the listener for an incoming request. So I would just say app.get, and here I will just do a slash, and then as a second argument there will be a callback like this, and the callback will take a request and response arguments. And in this particular case, we wanted to say console.table, and that would be request, what was it, query? I think it was query. Was it query? Yeah, it was query. Right. And then we can say const greeting equals request query message, or just the word world. And we will say response send, and we will send a little bit of well, backticks again, and we will say h1 hello space, and then string interpolate on this guy, and then close the h1 like this. And here in the string interpolator, we just want to say greeting like this. Okay, so as you notice, I don't always code from start to finish. I jump a little bit back and forward, make sure that we use our eyes as much as possible. If we make a typo, let's say that I forget to type an extra E, you see that this greeting changes color, and the original variable that I set on line 7 is being a little grayed out. It's not as sharp. So VS Code is very intelligent. It prevents us from doing mistakes and so on. So that's a good thing. Let's spin this up. Let's see if it actually works, or if I made a fool of myself. So for that, we need to go over to the next slide, and we need to go into the package JSON, and in package JSON we need to add another key that is called scripts, and that key needs to hold an object that holds another key that is called start, and there we want to say nodemon app.js. So follow my lead on this one. I'm going over to package JSON, and inside of package JSON, let's say after dev dependencies, doesn't matter where you place this, you say you'd add a comma, double quotes, scripts, and that adds an object, and here you want to say start, and that would be nodemon app.js. Hopefully that will work. Who knows? Right. At this stage, if everything is saved, we should be able to do yarn start. And he says that he spins up nodemon 2.0.10, and the service is listening on HTTP localhost 3000. So we can just grab that, go to our browser, we can enter this URL into our address field, and we should see hello world. And if we look at the terminal now, it does contain a table, but the table is empty. I hope you can see that as well. It's no difference between setting up script like that or running nodemon in the console. The thing is that later on we will probably modify this even further and add more parameters to the script, and it's also a good practice to start things with scripts. But okay, so it just said hello world. Now let's modify the URL. Let's add a question mark, and we will say message equals Mars. And now when you hit enter, you can see that it says hello Mars, and in your terminal you should see the table containing the parameters, as I do. And would I now add more with an and sign? Let's just say, random key equals whatever. We can see that the application accepts that key, but we don't use it for anything, of course, right? Because we didn't tell our server to actually do something with this. So you can send off as many query parameters as you want, but your application will of course only use the ones that you tell it to use, and the only one we are telling it to make any use of is the one that is called message. Does that make sense? Did everyone manage to spin this up? Do we have any issues somewhere? I will interpret this silence as like everyone is doing okay.
Sorry, I'm on Windows 11, right? The preview, and my computer was acting up, and I fell behind.
All right, but that's okay, Carl. The recording will be there, so just don't stress over it. You can definitely redo those small exercises later. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And but if you want, what you can do is to share your screen. We can help you out in one way or another. But I can also send you that code because it's not.
So let me tell you quickly. Today, I don't know why. Every so often, my screen flips upside down. It's very annoying.
That must be annoying. Absolutely. But I sent the code in the chat window on Slack as well. So if you want to grab that, it's totally fine to do. All right.
Thanks.
So you see, there's a few interesting things here. So Express.js is a very small but yet very powerful library to build applications using Node.js actually. So that's a Node.js app. But if you see on my line 5, the function that the good people that created Express are created for us to allow us to listen for GET requests is actually called GET, right? It is not called listen for a GET request or listen for whatever, right? It's called GET because that's a smart way to name that function. It will be an HTTP request of a GET format, and that's what we are listening for, and therefore the function should be called GET. It's just good practice, in my opinion, right? And we need to kind of just remember that this is the name of that particular function. And soon enough, when I will be talking more about HTTP requests, you will figure or ask yourself, well, if a GET request is called GET in Express, are there any others like POST or PUT or PATCH or so on? And we will dive into that as well. So keep this in your VS Code, and I will dive a little deeper into my presentation now. Right, let's do that. So because we want to save the other types of requests for later today actually. So some more much needed theory, which is of course something you look forward to, I assume. Let's talk a little bit about resources because it's a very important term and a concept. Let's discuss what we can do with resources and kind of define what is a resource. Now, in the context of web applications, go ahead, Carl. Let's see. We have a question from Ethan on putting commands in yarn. If commands are more complex, it makes it easier. Right, exactly. Also, other systems might not use NodeMon. Well, then they should probably. Well, NodeMon is a dependency based in that application, so that would be. Oh, you mean like, okay, so you install the dependency and then you kind of abstract away using the script, of course, right? Yeah. You use yarn start. Anyway, resources. In the context of web-based apps, a resource can be basically anything that can be pointed to using HTTP. So it could be a website in itself, its default document. It could be an image, a document, but it can also be a record or a row in the database. And with that, we need to accept that the possibilities are almost endless in terms of what we can fetch and so on. A resource have a life cycle. So let's think for a while what in terms of what can we do with a resource. If we for a second accept that a resource in this example would be a document, right? So what can we do with a document? Let's say you write a letter. A document can be created. You originally create this letter by opening up your word processor and starting to write it. So that creates a letter. Once you are finished with it, you can read the letter, and then you can notice that there are a few typos, or you haven't expressed yourself in the proper way, so you want to alter it, you want to edit it somewhere, so you can change the letter and transform it in one way or another, and then you just come to a realization that no, I don't want to send this letter, I want to get rid of it, so you can delete it, right? And if you think about that, that is basically what you can do to almost any object in life, in real life, and in the digital realm. You create things, you look on things, you change them, and you get rid of them. A human being is being born. It can be interacted with in one way or another, looked at and then talked to, and so on. Uh, a human grows over time and changes, grows a beard and gets old and so on, and eventually that human dies, which are basically the four things you can do to any other living or dead object. Does that make sense to you people? Is there anything else you can do to, for instance, a document than create it, read it, change it, and get rid of it? I think that's it. So what if we want to kind of structure this in computer terms? You can create, read, you can update, and you can destroy. And you've probably heard about this acronym called CRUD, which are the four actions that you can do to an object or a resource. You can C, create, R, read, U, update, D, destroy. Well, hiding it is just so JD said you can possibly hide it. So hiding a document is not really, it's also altering it. It's changing its attributes, visible, true or false. So that would fall under the update action, in my opinion. If you want to permanently hide it, then you just delete it. All right, so the CRUD cycle, as we call it, is it kind of originates, this idea of CRUD actions originates from the database functions, but has evolved and is nowadays used as a design principle for dynamic applications that makes use of the HTTP protocol, data distribution services, and storage, for instance, SQL, right? So the CRUD things, those actions, are implemented as a collection of functions for persistent storage using, for instance, a database, but it could be other things as well, like you can store it in a file system or something like that, right? But so we have moved away or expanded this idea or this cycle. It's not really a pattern, from just being dealing with databases into more broader application. And those functions are of course procedures, and they are grouped by what they're supposed to do. So create procedures, they generate new records in a database, for instance, or if that's what we're using, via insert statements. Read procedures reads the database based on the parameters that we are passing into to our applications. Update procedures, they modify records also based on the input params. And the delete procedures, they basically delete records or resources. Now let's go full circle on this one, because that is the important thing. How does this map to the HTTP protocol? So one of the many parts of the HTTP protocol that is, in my opinion, extremely important to understand as developers of web-based applications are the 4 or 5 HTTP verbs that are most common. So the URLs that we are using, they are used to identify the particular host that we want to interact with or to communicate with, but the action that should be performed on the server is specified by the type of request that we want to make, and that in turn is specified by HTTP verbs. And the most common ones are get, which is something that we already used, then post, we mentioned it, we haven't used it yet, then you have put and patch, and they are kind of bundled together with slight differences, and then delete verb. And so if we look at the CRUD functions and map that to those HTTP verbs, which is the important part of what I'm trying to convey to you, is that we use the post requests to create objects, get requests to read objects, put patch to update them, and then the delete request to destroy an object. So that's how we kind of map these together. And if it doesn't really make sense to you yet, it will hopefully do it over time. But the 4 things that we can do to an object or a resource is to create, look at it, update it, destroy it, get rid of it, and we use HTTP post, get, put patch, or delete to do that. And a follow-up question could be, Thomas, what is the difference between put and patch? And I could go into an example, but it will just take some time. We will have plenty of time to cover that when we work with databases later on. So, what did we learn about? We learned about the request response, a little bit about the HTTP verbs, the query parameters, and we started to use Express.js a little bit. And we did mix some theory and practice today. And at this stage, I would say it's time for a 5-minute at least of a break. And then we're going to do a little bit more coding after that. Is that okay?
Well deserved.
I know. I'm getting thirsty here. Guys,
Same.
let's take 5 and let's reconvene soon, and let's do a little bit of more coding after that. Yeah, see you soon. some testing. Oh, let's do. All right, folks. Who's still with us?
I'm here.
All right, Pedro. Good, good, Ethan. Good, Carl.
And I put up also.
You did call it. Good stuff. Good stuff. That's great. That's great. Is it hard to follow too much info, too much to theory? I'm trying to keep it at the minimum, but you know. Again, you can
I
go ahead, Ethan.
well, I hope you're doing okay with not seeing a lot of faces. It's like if I put myself on video, I forget I'm on video because since I don't talk very often, and I'm afraid I'll,
Are you afraid that you
do
do
something.
two weird faces and stuff? Is that you, or no? No problems. I make do. It's always better to see people because sometimes when I talk I wanna see some do a read on the facial expressions or what have you, but it is what it is. It's okay. The thing is, guys, that you need to. I really enjoy that you are chatting away on the in the messages. That's really good. Um, um, I don't know if that's not very persistent. Perhaps we should use Twitch for chat. I don't know. Let's do what we are doing right now. It works out, I guess.
So for me, this is good right now because actually what caused my problems was connecting a second screen. So I just I don't want too many screens open right now.
Gotcha. All right. Okay, boys and girls, or at least one girl. Let's see
Me.
if see if we can. Way too many guys in this session. We need to do something better. We have to do a better the job to attract more female coders. That's one of the main of the goals of the Agile Ventures charity to make coding accessible to more females. Anyways, let's do some testing and so on. Let's try out some other stuff. I I will try to install an extension to my VS Code because I want to be able to make post requests. Get a pull request to the fusion pull request. No, can I do request network? No. Well, let's see. Let me just do a quick research here. Make post request from VS Code. I know that there is an extension. I had it. I had it installed before. Yeah, REST client. Right, of course. Right. So let's do REST client. Right. So there is an extension that is called REST client. I think we should install it on our VS Codes. Right. And now let's see, how do we use REST client? We use it by in an editor type. Right, exactly. In editor type this. Okay, let's try that then. How do you mean in editor? Just anywhere in the editor? Really? Well, you mean like here? No, that cannot be it. HTTP. Come on, give me a break. Localhost dot 3000. No, that's not it. Follow link command. No, that's not. That cannot be that. Extension rest. So when they say do this in a editor, what could they possibly mean by that? What could they possibly mean by that? In an
I believe the Thunder client is also quite good.
You think so?
Yeah, I've heard of it before.
Okay, let's take a look at the Thunder client then.
It'll show up with another icon on the left menu, and then you can do calls from there.
Oh, that's nice. That would be...
You have some more still. You have the 3 dots.
Yeah, there it is. No. The extension Thunder. Okay, Thunder client. Right, there it is. New request, new request. How do I... There we go. Get. Oh, there it is. Right. Nice. So let's get rid of this. Come on, give me a fucking break. Get lost. Get lost. Hold on a second, guys. Right. Now I'm just making too many different close all. Right, and now we're going to open up Thunder client again. New request. There we go. Sorry about that. Right, so hopefully you got this Thunder client installed. That was much better than the REST client. Thank you for that. So let's do HTTP local host colon 3000, and we send this off. It's a GET request. Here we can choose various type of requests, and so we're going to do a GET request, send this off, and we see the hello world as a response, right? Because that's what we kind of sent off. If I send a parameter as a query parameter, hopefully here somewhere, message, and then Thomas, and send this off, then it will say hello Thomas. We are not using a browser, so it won't be interpreted as HTML. You probably can preview this here, right? So if you click on preview, you can see the HTML being rendered, should you want to do that. But all right, so let's see if we can go into app.js, and let's add some code and say this. For instance, app.post, and then just a slash, comma, and a callback, like this. And again here we say rec and res, and here we can in principle say something like console, no, not console, perhaps, which is just, yeah, we do it. Let's do console.table, and here we want to table request body. That's the only thing we... Oh no, we can just say response send, and here we would like to send a little bit of JSON perhaps, and not message, and we say just rec dot body, rec body message, right, rec body. But in order for this to work, to be able to accept a post request, we're going to have to add a little bit of configuration to our app. So this can, in principle, fail for us before we're able to do that. So here in our Thunder client, we want to change this to a post request and remove the message and Thomas and so on, just say 3000, And now we want to activate the tab that says body. And here we want to create an object, like, you know, 2 curly brackets, and let's just say title the Bible, right, as a string. And let's see if we send this off, what sort of an error we get, or what sort of a response do we get, and so on. So we did get this. So we got a 200 response. We got something totally blank in return, right? We didn't get anything, although we were hoping to get a little bit of JSON back, but that didn't happen. And the reason for that is that this Express app is not configured to work with JSON objects. So we need to say app.use, and we will say express.json and 2 parentheses, and they will say what? Oh, well, I don't know why. That should work. That should work. Express, yeah, that should not be a problem. Let's see, app.use, and then we'll say express URL encoded, and here we will say as an object extend true. Extend true. And why are you crashing for me? Really? Why are you crashing for me? Express, because I misspelled express. Oh, gee. There we go. Now it's not crashing anymore. You see, so lesson learned. Yes, Pedro, thank you. Speak up, my friend. I don't always read the chat. Now I'm going to take a deep breath and tell you that 90% of all errors that you will encounter, me doing or yourself doing, are based in typos.
Yeah, I believe it's also extended and not extend. But and you get that warning as well.
Yeah, body
that.
parts are deprecating, yet provide extended. Right, provide extended, right, extended. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Right, thank you. Guess it's getting late or something, I don't know. So, let's redo the request again. We're just going to send off this title, the Bible, and now we get a bad request. Interesting. Why did we get a bad request? Because
you're sending a JSON object, not an actual JavaScript, so title needs to be in quotes, I believe.
Exactly. So there we go, and you need to use double quotes in JSON always, and not a JSON. There we go. Right, so now we get the response, and this is of course a nonsense type of response because we're responding with the same thing that we just sent in. So we're not doing much of any creation or anything, but that's at least a post request that is happening for us. And the pattern here is that the GET request is named GET. You know, the listener for a GET request is actually called GET, and the listener for a POST request is called POST. But there's another interesting part of the whole thing, that we are hitting the same URL. You see, it is actually the root path, and depending on the request type, we are hitting different types of our application, and we're doing two different things. Do you understand? And that is the very basics of another topic that we will be covering in this course, and that is the RESTful architecture and the RESTful API approach to how we build our applications, and where URLs come into play heavily in identifying the type of resource we want to work with, and what sort of actions we want our servers to perform. Now, again, if we look at the output of this Thunder client, we can see that, the things that I was talking about. We have a status, and we're seeing at 200 here. It says status 200 OK. When we send off something that is badly formatted, like if I remove the last curly bracket and try to send this, I get a status 400, a bad request, right? And then we get a syntax error and all of this stuff, right? So if I reinstate the curly bracket, send this off, we're back on 200. We see that there is a size. It took 9 milliseconds. We see the response, but we also see headers. So let's click on that. And we can see here some metadata about the request itself. There is an X powered by Express, content type, content length, e-tag, whatever that is. There's a date stamp on it, and the last one, it says connection. So the connection is closed now that when we are looking at it. It was open for a few seconds, like 9 milliseconds, but since we already got the response back, there is no connection open between us and the server, which brings me back to what I said before about statelessness. We are not in connection with our server constantly, only when we make the requests and when we wait for the response. Then after that, boom, the server forgets about us faster than our ex-girlfriend. That's what happens. There is another protocol, just to give you a glimpse into the future. There is another protocol that is called WebSockets that will actually. Oh, there Pedro just wrote about WebSockets. I think I said it the second you hit enter. So WebSockets is initiated as an HTTP request, but then there is a switch between protocols, and it keeps the connection open at all time when it subscribes to a server that could use, and that protocol is often used for push notifications. We will be practicing that. I have a fun little demo when we build a chat application using WebSockets. I host it on my machine, open up a VPN, and you guys will be able to chat with me in real time on that little application. And it's a breeze. It's a fantastic protocol in HTML and on Node.js. But that's basically the get and post requests. But I did promise you a little bit of testing. So let's dive into that. Let's close the Thunder. What was it called? Thunderbird? Thunder something. I forgot already. Thunder client. Yeah, there it is. Sorry. Good memory, but very short. So we have two routes, one GET request and one POST request that we're dealing with. Of course, this is not how you build applications. You extract that and you modularize your application structure one way or another. But for a demo, this can do, just to showcase some concepts. But let's see if we can write a little bit of tests. And I prepared very last minute, so this might be totally wrong, but I did prepare a little bit of code for that. So let's see if we can make that happen. Perhaps. There, yes. Okay, thanks. Right. So we need to add a few dependencies. 3 libraries. One called Mocha, which is the testing framework. Then we have Chai, which is a framework for assertions. So we can ask our tests if our functions actually live up to our expectations. And then we're going to add another library called Supertest, which will help us to spin up our application in test environment and run it, so it will be easier for us. So let's head over to our terminal, stop the server, and you stop the server with Command C on a Windows computer or Control C on a Mac, and we just say yarn add -d Mocha, Chai, and super test. There we go. Hello, Jay. Let's hit enter and install those dependencies. Pum, pum, pum. And once we've done that, we need to go into our package.json and we need to add a new script. So we say comma here and we will say test, and here I think I'm just gonna do Mocha right now. I don't need to add the other stuff. I don't think I need to add the other stuff. If we need to add these node env test and node no warnings one, we can add it later. It's about the log output. It's not that super important, I guess. Hi Jay, you made it. That's good. So you're gonna have to catch the recording for the other stuff that we covered today, if you want, of course. Right. So let's see if this works actually. Let's see if this works. So if I just say yarn test, I should get like an output. No test files found in test. So this means that I need to create a new folder, which is something that I don't have in the instructions, so follow along, that I want to call test. And then in that folder, I want to create a new file, and let's call this file just app.js app.js.spec. No, app.spec.js. That's what we want to say. app.spec.js. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. And the next thing we want to do is to tell our test, and this is a bit complicated, not so that complicated, but it's a bit, it's way too much configuration in for my taste. But we need to tell our test to require chai and a notation that is called chai expect. Then we need to tell our test that we will use the app.js settings where we configure our Express.js application, and then we need to load super test, and then we need to have a before block and an after block, which are just actions that will be run before the test suite actually before it starts, and then after, once it has been closed. And basically what we want to do there is to spin up a server and listen for the requests. So that's what we are doing on this one. You cannot copy and paste this, or perhaps you can, but I will write this up nonetheless myself. So in the test environment here, in the test file, let me just move this out of the way. Right, so I want to say const chai equals require chai, and then we want to say const expect equals chai dot expect, and then we want to say const app equals require, and then as a string, then we do this app. So I don't know if you saw, if you saw that, I can redo this. If I'm in this string and I do ... then there is a pop-up that kind of tells me what sort of files I can choose from, which is a good thing because then I don't have to make so many typos on that. So again, I choose app on this on this one. And then we do say const super test equals require super test, like this. Right, and then we do the before block. And if you want those pop-ups, there is an extension for Mocha and Chai to install. So you can just install this, and that will give you those Emmet snippets if you want them around. I like to have them because they, the only thing I need to do is to type before, and that pops up, and I get some code for free. The callback is for free, and that's a nice thing. Here I want to change this to say done, the only parameter that I need. I'm just going to say server equals app listen on until we are done, and then request equals super test agent server. Right, and this is the minimal super test. There we go. This is the minimal setup we need to do, and then we want to add the after block. Again, here we just want to say done, and then we say server.close, and then pass in done. Okay, and a lot of people are like thinking that it's hard to test JavaScript applications or applications in general, and I can kind of agree with that. But then again, if things were easy, we would probably not do this. But it's all about quality, I think, and I will have another talk about the importance of testing and why you do it and so on. But don't get scared just because you have to write a little bit of code, because that comes with the territory. Yeah, that's basically what we need to do, and this is a little too much for my taste, but it is what it is, basically. That is most of the setup. So why would this? There's some typos in this PDF presentation, so I will probably send you a new one later on once we're done with this talk. Now I want to add a block that we call describe, like this. And so I want to describe a GET request to the root path, which is often symbolized just with a forward slash. This is just a good practice. I wouldn't say it's a best practice because that would infer that I think I'm best, but I don't. But I usually, in my test, I say that, especially when I'm going to test if my requests are coming through and they are returning what I want them to return, then I usually say that I'm doing a GET request to, and then a path to what I'm trying to test. So yeah. Then we want to add a before each block. There's a slight difference between before and before each. The before block, it will be executed before the entire test suite, whereas the before each will be executed before each test case. We will get to that in just a second. And so here we want to say that the response is something that we wait for. So we need to transform this callback to an asynchronous call. So we will say async here, and then we wait for the response is a request dot get. We make a get request to slash, and then question mark message equals Uranus. Uranus, that was cool. Uranus. Anyway, and then that's what we do before each test case. And now we are gonna write a test case, which is an assertion. So we say it, and a callback, is expected to respond with status 200. And then we just say expect response dot status 2 dot equal to equal 200, like this. Expect response status to equal 200. And if you kind of look beyond the parentheses and the dots and so on, it's almost like English, right? Expect response status to equal 200. That's one way to put it, right? And so we can write another test case before we actually run this. So we could say it is expected to respond with a bit of HTML. That's a really shitty message, but we can live with that today. And so we could say something like expect response dot body to equal, and then as a string we just say h1 hello Uranus, and then we close the h1. I think that will fly, or perhaps not, I don't know. That's what testing is for. You write some tests and then you bump your head against the wall to make them run. Right. Yeah, it looks good. A lot of fuzz for nothing, right? We're just testing for the status code and if we get some HTML back. Let's see if we can run this. Let's see if we can actually make this happen. So we do yarn test and the moment of truth. App listen is not a server. Server is not defined. Wow. Okay. Right. Because I made a typo, so we need to say here let server request response server. Let server. Right. So we have to define those variables. That's one thing, and then listen. Well, why aren't you this? This should work. Why wouldn't this work? Really? Huh.
Do we need to export the app somehow or no?
Could be. Could be. Yeah. Right. Module exports equals app. Module exports is, yeah. Right. Is that what I need to do? Why would I have to do that? I guess I need to do that. Let's see. No.
Never mind what I said. It's probably not correct.
You already defined request and response on like line 5.
Yeah, that was just that I didn't had to do that. So I remove that. Right, that's when you get when you do bonuses, right? Right. Well, expected this to equal. Okay, so the first one passed, so we did get a 200, so that's good. But the second one failed, and why would that fail? Is response body not right? So can I set a debugger? No, I can't set a debugger here. Let's see. This. Why wouldn't request response body? That was an equal. Interesting.
What about using console.log?
Yeah, I can console log this or yeah, but that's nothing. So console log response, but that's going to be a huge object, I think.
Response.body.
Now that's empty. That's
Oh, I see.
that was empty. So there's nothing there. Body is empty. Oh, it's text. Okay. All right. Okay. It's text. So just change that response to text. I don't know why that is text. I'm not that into Express.js, to be honest. But it is text apparently. Right. So now we're past. This is passing for us now. What is worrying me is that it doesn't exit. But that's another setting, I guess. So I have to manually stop it with Command C. Yeah, so that's what this kind of does. We can do just a quick other to say describe. We can describe the post request, right? So we can say post like this, and then before each, I can actually copy this one, and then we just want to make a call like this, and let's just, this one is going to be body, for God's sake. It needs to be body, otherwise I'm going to be pissed off. Body to equal something. We can just what was it? It was this message, and then an object here. Now the thing here is that we're not going to pass this in as a query parameter, but rather as a second object here. So I'm going to probably say params, and then title or whatever I want to send off, title whatever, something like that. Params title whatever, and I'm going to run this now, and we will see what I get.
I believe you just have one typo. You're doing request.get.
Thank you. Thank you. That saved my life, actually. Thanks a lot. Right. Yeah, so he didn't get that, so that's not the thing. So that was empty. Let's just try this without the params. So obviously I need to read documentation for supertest.
It looks like body is not a string, but an object, at least from the...
Yeah, but I'm getting nothing back. Do you understand?
Oh, yeah.
And the app and this is configured to return everything that I send in. So I probably don't send in this correctly in this test environment. So if we do super test, no, actually we can do this node npm.js.org, and we go to super test documentation. It was a while since I used this package, actually, so that's why. Super test, come on. Super test, there we go. And then we're just gonna figure out how save express that expect rest status JSON name, right, and then describe get set expect request get, but how do I send params? post request. Oh, so I have to send this in. Okay. I think I need to do this basically in my test environment. Where is that? Where are you? Oh, there's a spec. So I do post, I close this parentheses, and then I just say name John. It doesn't really matter. So we should say name John, but it would probably fail on formatting one way or another. These things are really thorough. Let's see if that works now. Right, so you see now it says expected message name John 2 equals message name John, but without spaces, you see, because I missed the spaces in my assertion. So I need to format this properly. Dum, 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 dum. This one. So now this will probably pass for me now. No, because what did I do wrong? So I just gonna. Oh, it's single quotes. Fuck you. You see, it won't accept anything but the right thing. So computers are not humans, so they won't understand that I'm actually getting what I want. And now he escapes this. Oh gosh, how boring this is, right? I won't be bothered because I don't know how to remove those escaped characters.
Is it a string, Thomas? Or if you remove the double quotes, doesn't it work? If you to
Oh,
equal
if I
the
really,
object.
oh, really an object. Oh, yeah, perhaps it does. Come on, get lost. You mean like this?
Yeah,
Yeah, you might be totally right.
that way it doesn't matter the formatting. Okay. No.
But what's the difference? I don't see the difference here. It's the same. It's the same thing, right?
It is.
It is the same thing. There's no difference in what he's looking for. Yeah. So this is the frustrating part of testing, and it is 21. It's 9:15 my time, which is approximately 40 minutes over time. So, or we're gonna call it quits here, folks, if that's okay with you. Your mission for until we see each other this weekend, if you want, because they are optional, those sessions, is to fix this one way or another. Okay, you want to play around with that. Let's do any questions, any feedback on today's session. Did you learn anything, people?
Yeah, getting into the testing part, that's new to me. So
I definitely learned stuff.
It's good to see the tests not pass for you as well. So
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. No, but this is actually a mystery because the way I look at it, it is the same thing. It's I probably just need to parse this into JSON or something. Yeah, you know what? I can't really let it go. So let's just do JSON parse this, and then we just do JSON parse.
I believe that's the feeling for developers, correct? You just can't let it go.
No, it's like impossible, So actual response or
No, but
equals.
I thought Jason dot parse was for a string.
Stringify. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Stringify. and then we just stringify this, right? Thank you. Let's see if this. Come on, give me a break. I will not quit this session until I pass this. Yes. Okay. Good. Whew. Yeah. So you just so basically what I needed to do is to normalize the whole thing, so it is the same format both as what we get from the server and what we are asserting to. So now it is the same thing. But it was a bit weird because it looked like it was the same thing before already. You know, it did say name John. Anyhow, never give up, folks. Never give up. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great.
Thank
Oh
you.
yeah.
Can you say more about Saturday? What's the Saturday story?
Yeah.
On Saturday we will do a little bit of so it's a more of a voluntary thing if you want to join in or not. We're gonna practice the things that we kind of covered in the first two sessions, so we can solidify those skills. Write a little bit Express, passing in a few params here and there, and so on. I will try to do an extra session to connect this little Express.js application to a Postgres database, and perhaps do a little bit of creating and updating a few records. But it's going to be a little bit of impromptu and you know, so on. Hopefully Mike and Anya, or both, or yeah, will be there, and we can do some breakout sessions. And if there's stuff that you don't understand during or understood during these demos, or if you rewatch the recordings and things are a bit hard for you, then we can have a free discussion about that. And it will be the same time as or Mike and Anya, did we decide on the time or anything? I think it was 5:30.
Yeah, should be same time.
5:30 p.m., right?
Yeah, just same. The time we always use for the weekend collaboration. So
yeah,
we can change the time on the calendar to be 30:30.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is this time working out for? I mean, Ethan, you're in the US, right? So you're a few hours behind.
Yeah, it was fine for me. Yeah.
Right. And I think the others are like in the UTC plus minus a few hours. And that
+1 for me, and it works perfectly before dinner.
Good.
Can you say again what time?
5:30 on
5:30
Saturday and
UTC.
yeah, UTC, yeah. Same time
It's
as this one.
same time as this one.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right,
Yeah.
guys.
So, can you one last thing? Can you post the code for the test in Slack?
I can.
Great.
I can.
Thanks.
No problemos. Have a great evening, folks. Thank you for tuning in, and I see you this weekend, one way or another.
See you on the weekend.
See ya.
See you, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you for the
Bye.
session.
Bye.
Bye.